Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fourth module of the DTB KBA Financial Literacy and Enterprise Development training session. It's been an exciting journey so far and so much more to come. Karibuni sana. And as usual, even as you join in, let us know where you are joining us from, how you heard about this training, what you have taken home so far, what you're looking forward to in today's module, which is financial management, which is very core to every single business, whether large or small. And so it's going to be a very insightful and enriching session. Karibuni sana. You can share with us where you're joining us from, share with us what has changed. During the last session, we were very interested to hear what you've practically applied in your business off of the sessions that we've had so far. And so we'd be very excited to hear testimonials of what has changed since we began about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Is there any difference? So karibuni sana. Please feel free to let us know where you're joining us from on the chat tab. And then questions can be addressed to the Q&A tab. We have Fernando joining from Lavington. Karibu sana. Yeah, we would be excited to hear where you're joining us from, what has changed in your business ever since we began. Yes, karibuni sana. So today's session is module 4 under financial management. This is again the DTB KBA Financial Literacy and Enterprise Development session. And as you can see, DTB is committed to helping customers and even non-customers really grow their businesses and be equipped to take their businesses to the next level. We have Janet from North Kinangop, Karibu sana. We have Eugene from Kenya, Karibu. We have Betty from Mombasa. We have Billy from Bungoma, Fanny's from Kisumu. I can already see familiar faces. We're glad to have you guys back. Thank you for coming. It shows that there is value that is being gotten. And so please feel free to tell us what you've taken home so far, what has changed in your business. We have Paul from Kiserian, Sheila from Kisumu. Karibu sana. Joyce is telling us very educative sessions. Thank you, Joyce. We are glad to hear that. We have Kangundo Road represented. Welcome, 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 everybody. Let us know what has changed in your business. We have Taveta in the house. Thank you, Meru. Thank you. It's amazing. Amazing to see. Yeah, you can also tell us about your business, what you do. We have Danhal Consulting in the house. Yeah, let us know what your business is about, what products you sell, and even before we begin this session, what does financial management mean to you and how have you been handling them? Yes, so karibuni sana. Please also direct your questions to the Q&A tab, and we will be able to track the questions. We have Greenfield Enterprises. Karibuni sana. So yes, once again, welcome. Welcome to the DTB KBA Financial Literacy and Enterprise Development Training. We are on module 4. We're on a 10-module journey. And so there's so much more in store, even as we continue gaining insights to be able to take our businesses to the next level. And so today, we cover financial management, which is very, very core to your businesses. Karibuni sana. So at this point, I would like to invite our head of sustainability and citizenship, that is Anne Derry, to let us know a little bit more about DTB and the space that it is in with regards to MSMEs. Karibu sana, Anne.
Thank you so much, Mantui. I hope you can all hear me. Good morning. Karibuni sana once again to our fourth session of the 2023 KBA and DTB Financial Literacy and Enterprise Development Program. Today, we are focusing on a very exciting topic, and many of you have asked a lot of questions with respect to this. Businesses mostly are the result of either passion or opportunity, and it's always best when the two merge. But then it is important to understand that having a vision and passion must be complemented by having the right skills to run and manage a business. But even at the personal level, for many of us, I believe I speak for many, we would all appreciate those financial management skills so that we can live better and better quality lives. So I'm happy that today we are joined by Mr. William Kinai. He'll be introducing himself shortly, and he will walk us through today's session. So I'm really hoping to learn as much as we all will, and to also hear from you your thoughts on the session. So karibu sana, William.
Thank you, Anne. Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to our module on financial management. I'll project the first slide. I am William Kinai. I have been providing training in financial management since the year 2000, and I am the financial director for our firm called Novartis Limited. And a warm welcome to each one of you as we learn about financial management, which is a work in progress for a lot of our firms. And it continues to be a challenge and an area of opportunities for improvement as we go forward. So welcome, and let us learn from one another. So don't feel shy to ask your questions on the chat, on the question and answer section. So we'll begin right away. Just allow me to stop the video at this point in time to save on some bandwidth and RAM as we begin the presentation. So what we'll be talking about today is we are looking at financial management, and we will be looking at 3 core areas of financial management, which is the working capital management, how to make financing decisions, and then that big decision, how to make capital investments. So by the end of this module, you will be equipped with concepts and skills that are basic to the practice of financial management. This is our outline. 4 areas. We'll make an introduction. We will have an overview of working capital management. We will move on to the financing decision, and then we will discuss about how to make a capital investment decision. So our first section makes an introduction to the practice of financial management. So kindly in the chat section, just kindly give us an indication of how do you make your financial decisions in your firm. What are your financial management priorities? What are your financial management priorities? Just take a minute and indicate how you make financial management decisions. What's the priority in your organization? Yes, I can see a question. Yes. What is your basic, what guides excellent survival? Lots of firms are barely surviving, you know, they're just holding it there. That's true, Christine. Thank you. So what is your priority for your firm, your organization? Recurrent expenditures, clearing debts. Thank you for those answers. So thank you for those answers. And yes, clients' needs, thank you. Short-term, medium-term, and long-term decisions, paying of debts, loans and suppliers, daily operations, operational cost, that is payment of suppliers. Thank you, and all those are correct. Thank you for those contributions. I can see expansion is also a priority, sustainability. Thank you, thank you. So just continue adding your priorities there as we look at how should we be making our financial management decisions in our farms. So this is what we will be looking at today as we discuss. We will explain what financial management entails and the 3 core decisions that we have to make in financial management. What is financial management about? What decisions are we making? Primarily in financial management, you will be allocating the financial resources you have as an organization, as an enterprise, a business enterprise, to the various users that compete for access to those financial resources. For example, a customer pays you today. There are so many things that you have to do. You want to survive as a business, you want to pay your creditors, you have to pay your obligations, your salaries, there are taxes you have to file. So financial management is about applying the financial resources that you have access to towards the various competing needs for those financial objectives within the organization. Financial management is about how you manage your financial resource, money. Then the next question arises. How should you make your financial management decisions? How should you make your financial management decisions? There's a bold statement there. All the decisions you make in your business enterprise is about the maximization of the owner's wealth. It's maximizing the value to the owners of the farm. And I will clarify this as follows. Why do you make all decisions from that lens of maximizing value to the shareholders, the owners of the business? It is because the person who gets paid last is the owner. Remember, you get paid by a customer today. You pay your rent, you pay your suppliers, you pay the bank for whatever loans that you have, overdrafts that you have, you pay your employees their salaries, you pay all obligations. The residue is from where you will be able to pay yourself or reward yourself from for the from the work that you have done, from the energy, effort, sweat and blood that you have expended on your business. So the person who gets paid last is you, the shareholder, which means the person who gets paid last is the shareholder, which means that when you pay yourself, when you reward yourself, then all other stakeholders have been rewarded. Their interests have been taken care of. The obligations towards all other stakeholders have been fulfilled, which means you've paid your rent. So by the time you pay yourself, you will have paid your rent, you will have paid your employees, you will have paid your creditors, you will have paid taxes. You get paid last. So at that point in time, when you reward yourself as the owner, as a shareholder, you will have already met your obligations towards all other stakeholders in the farm. That is why any decision you make has to be seen from the perspective of, will this decision maximize value for the shareholders? If it does, it's a good decision, because we presume that you will have already met all the interests of all other stakeholders to the farm. You will have met all obligations towards external parties to the organization. So in summary, how do we make financial management decisions? We make financial management decisions from the lens of, does the decision you take maximize value to shareholders? If it does, it is the right decision. If it does not, then probably it is not a very good decision. So having said that, there are 3 decisions that you will have to make as a financial manager. And these are the 3 decisions. We will make a working capital management decision. The first decision is a working capital management decision. The second decision is the financing decision. And the third decision is the capital investment decisions. So in the next slide, we will be presenting the specific area of the balance sheet that the decision relates to. So the first decision relates to the shaded area. The first decision relates to the area presented just a minute, I get back to my slide. So the first decision, let me just get back to Zoom. I am getting, let me project. So the first decision that you make is going once again. I'm having a
Hi, William. I think we've lost you. Maybe can yeah, maybe you can try switching off the camera. All right. Sorry for that. William will be rejoining us shortly. Okay. So even as he rejoins us shortly, we can. Yes, we've lost him. We'll just give him a few minutes to rejoin. I think he's right back. So maybe William, you can try again, but without the video, so that we can have the sound working a little better. Yeah. And we continue to see the various businesses represented here. Thank you, everybody, so much. It's interesting to see the wide array of industries represented. This is fantastic to see that many industries represented are interested in bettering their financial management. Karibu, William. I think you can try and switch off the video so that the sound can be better. Yeah, maybe you can try unmuting. Yeah, you're still on mute.
Okay, I am back. Thank you. Sorry about that. My slides collapsed. It went off, and also PowerPoint went off. So I'm opening the slides once again. Then we can proceed from where we had stopped. I apologize for that. So it's just a moment. You can hear me, Mantui?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let me just project the slides once more. So we were mentioning about working capital finance. This is a decision that relates to how you manage your inventories, one, how you manage your accounts receivable, two, how you manage your accounts payable, and then lastly, how you manage the asset cash. So I'm sharing the slides. So Mantui, just confirm you can see the slide on DTB where we started?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay,
thank you, William.
Okay, thank you. So let me move on to where we were. So this is where we are. We're talking about, yes, that's where we were. So the decision we're making will relate to those items shaded in gray. Inventories, how do you manage your inventories? How do you manage your accounts receivable? How do you manage cash? How do you manage your current liabilities? This includes payments to your suppliers, the accounts payable. How do you manage advances you receive from customers? And then how do you manage short-term loans, for example, overdrafts and other short-term sources of finance? So what we're discussing in working capital items covers that area shaded in gray. Whatever organization or business you are in, this is a decision you are making daily, consciously or unconsciously. It's a daily decision. It's basically what you do in most organizations, 8 to 5, in most businesses, 8 to 5. Of the three decisions, absolutely the most important is this working capital decision. The financing decision relates to the area shaded in gray. This is where do you raise funds from? Are you getting funds from owners? Are you getting long-term loans that are payable beyond 1 year, 12 months? Or are you financing your operations using current liabilities? These are those obligations that are payable within the next 12 months. Then the capital investment decision relates to those areas shaded in gray. How do you make that decision to acquire long-term assets, property, plant, and equipment, intangible assets, which are now probably the most important assets that you can have as a business person, as an organization, or as a business entity, and of course, the current assets which you cannot run business without. So at that point, I would just like to pause and just look at now, in financial management, we have said we're making three decisions. So in the chat section, kindly just give us an indication of what is the challenge to you currently. Which of the three decisions is giving you challenges? Just give us an indication in the chat section of which of the three areas are giving you a challenge currently. Kindly in the chat section, working capital management. Okay, financing also. Working capital, financing, working capital again. Okay, I think those are the two. All three are a challenge: capital investment, working capital. So I guess, thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments. Yes, it is evident that working capital is a common challenge for most of us. Financing is an issue. Capital investment is an issue. So what we're going to do next, let us just share a few ideas, beginning with the working capital management question that we face. So let us now move on to work. Thank you for your comments. So just keep your comments coming. Thank you very much. So let us move on to the first important area. This is how we manage our working capital. So how do we finance working capital? How do we manage working capital? It's a challenge for lots of organizations, big and small, but the smaller you are, the more critical it is. Lots of small businesses are looking for working capital right now. It's all important to have an appreciation of how you can make improvements in the management of your working capital. So what we'll be covering in this area, we'll introduce this concept of working capital, then share a few ideas on how to manage inventories, accounts receivables, cash, as well as the accounts payable. It can be done. Once again, it relates to the area shaded in gray. How do you manage your current assets and your current liabilities? Current assets are mainly your inventories, accounts receivables, you've sold on credit, you are yet to collect the money. Then you have the cash that you're holding and cash equivalents, which is cash you're holding at bank and in other short-term investments. Current liabilities predominantly we refer to the accounts payable. These are the suppliers who have supplied to you on credit and you're yet to pay them. But also we do get customers who pay us in advance. Lots of manufacturing organizations will want you to pay them in advance before they can begin processing your order. Even schools, when we take children to school, they want us to pay some percentage at the beginning of the term. And also the current liabilities also relate to the loans that we may have, the credit, short-term credit that we may have received from the bank and other creditors. Working capital is a term that we often use to describe the state of our business. Lots of small business people will tell you that what we don't have is working capital. The problem we have is working capital. Yes, it is a challenge. This concept refers to inventories you hold, which you intend to sell in the ordinary course of your business. For example, you are in food processing. You are selling, say, juice. The juice you manufacture, that's your inventory. You expect to sell it in the ordinary course of business. In contrast, a motor vehicle is not an inventory. A motor vehicle is a long-lived asset. Unless your business is selling motor vehicles, if you are a juice manufacturer, your motor vehicle is a long-term asset. It is part of the property, plant, and equipment. So in terms of inventories, we're referring to what you hold in order to add value so that you can sell. Accounts receivable is what you have sold on credit, you're yet to collect. Cash is money that is either held in liquid form or in a bank account. This is our concept of working capital. Why is this working capital a problem? It is a problem because it is not fully financed. That's why it's a problem. You do not have the resources to get the inventory. You do not have the resources because a customer is sitting on your money. You sold on credit, the customer hasn't paid you. working capital is a problem to your business because you do not have cash. So it's one of the three. You are not fully financed. Your current assets are not fully financed. That's the problem. That's why we say we're having a working capital problem. You do not have sufficient financing for your inventories, accounts receivable, and your cash. That's why we have a problem with this. So we introduce yet another dimension here. So how do you finance this current assets, this working capital? The most effective, the least costly way to finance your current assets is from the current liabilities that you can raise. These are the obligations that you will have to pay within 1 year. And because that item appearing there as current liabilities is missing, you do not have funding for your current assets. That is why you require working capital. So that difference between your total current assets, the total current assets you need to run your business, and the funding you have access to towards those current assets, the difference is your working capital financing requirement. That is why you do not have enough current assets, that because you're lacking this working capital financing. It's the reason we are borrowing from the banks, from the SACCOs, from friends, from relatives, simply because our current assets are not fully financed. That's the challenge. So, how can you reduce your net working capital requirement? How can you reduce that unfinanced working capital? So what we're going to do is just going to share a few ideas here. And this is the underlying premise, is that we can reduce our working capital needs by improving the efficiency with which we manage inventories, accounts receivables, cash, and our current obligations. Can you improve the efficiency with which you manage those 4 items? Have a look at this. You know these guys? Yes, just think about how these guys operate. Pizzas is a perishable item. You will have to buy, it's a perishable item. Once it is produced, the shelf life is extremely short. The customer will want to consume it while it's still warm from the oven. So put yourself in the shoes of, the organization that makes this product, and try and adopt the same concept in the way you run your organization. Number one, people who make pizzas use perishable ingredients. You cannot have too much of that. Generally, the arrangement is that they are delivered on a daily basis, especially for the ones who operate within Nairobi. Ingredients will be delivered in the morning for use throughout the day. So that way they reduce the inventory. 2, when you order, they will want you to pay on delivery or to pay with the order, which means in terms of accounts receivable, they will be minimized. The accounts receivable held will be those that relate to what has been ordered and not yet delivered to the customer, which will be delivered and paid for within an hour. Generally, they deliver to your home within approximately an hour. So can you use the same idea to manage your inventories and your accounts receivable? Cash. They may accept cash at the store, but lately most of the retailers accept cash via M-Pesa or via Visa card or any other card you may use. So the cash is managed. It is held securely on M-Pesa account or Visa card account or whatever other money transfer mechanism you have used to pay for your product, for your link, for your pizza, for your lunch or your dinner, whatever the case may be. So the cash is managed, it is secure. Then, if you are a big firm, big name, then when it comes to managing your accounts payable, these are your suppliers, you will negotiate. Suppliers, we will pay you at the end of the month. You have a credit facility from your suppliers. So this is an organization that has very little inventory, very little accounts payable. Cash is managed, and it will pay you at the end of the month as a supplier, which means, going back to the previous screen, the need for working capital finance is minimal. Absolutely minimal. Very low assets, very low accounts receivable, cash is in the bank, creditors will be paid at the end of the month. So the point here is this, that can you adopt similar strategies in the management of your working capital? I know small firms especially have lots of problems with working capital finance, but basically, as far as possible, the ideas we are sharing will help alleviate the problem. So that's the idea. Can we adopt this to whatever extent possible in whatever business that you are involved in? To a certain extent, it is feasible. So, inventories. The one thing that kills businesses, the one thing that will slow the development of your brand is the lack of inventory. We are not in business to sell nothing on the shelf. I mean, we're in business to sell something. Each time a customer walks in, customer expects me to have what I sell. So you must have sufficient inventories to meet your customers' needs. You do not want your customer to go to the next guy, the next competitor. You will lose that customer. So you want to have sufficient inventories to meet customers' needs. However, be cautious. Do not have just too much inventory, which is tying up capital, which especially for the smaller businesses, they do not have. So strike a balance. Have sufficient inventories to meet customers' needs. One, do not tie up too much money in inventories. So you will have to look at your operations and find out what is the most economical inventory to order for and keep in your store. Look for that optimal level of inventory. It varies from business to business. It varies depending on the scale of your operation. But look for that optimal inventory level, which if you buy, you will never run out of stock, but you will just have enough in inventory to meet the customer's needs. And it's as simple as that. Depends on your operations. You will have to get the answers yourself by looking at your operations. Target to have that economical inventory level in your stores at all times. Just by having a look at the chat section, any reactions so far? Any reactions you may want to make in the chat section with regard to what we have said so far? Thank you. So thank you. So once again, any questions that you have, let us have them on the question and answer forum. We'll have a look at them towards the end. So allow me to move on to yet another area that is a problem to a lot of small businesses. Thank you for the appreciations. So let us have a look at another area that is a challenge to a lot of our small businesses, even large businesses, which is the management of accounts receivable. You have supplied to your good customer who told you we will pay you as soon as possible. They haven't paid you. And I think a lot of small businesses are going through this challenge at this point in time. Even large businesses are going through this challenge currently. Lots of bad debts around. Also, by extension, in the finance sector, lots of people are paying very slowly their loans and advances from the various financial institutions, you know. So yeah, it's an area of challenge currently. So as a business entity, how do you manage this issue? How do you manage your accounts receivable? Yes, you're having challenges. I agree. Lots of people are having challenges. It's systemic. It's across the board. It's across sectors. However, what have you learned? That's a question. What have you learned from what we're going through now? One, you may have to redefine who gets credit going forward. You may have to relook at your credit policy. Yes, not everyone qualifies to get credit in the first place. And from the experiences that you have had with your credit customers, you can relook at, reclassify your customers so that those who are good at paying, you continue extending credit. So you need to have a credit policy, relook at who gets credit, categorize your customers, who qualifies, who doesn't. Two, how do you bill? the sooner you bill, the better. Lots of people prefer that you pay in cash. That's a billing policy. No credit provided, that's a billing policy. It works. So how do you bill? When do you bill? Do you get payment in cash? When you supply on credit, how do you get paid? Lots of organizations would even rather you pay in installments before they release the product to you. So they will keep it in store, they will keep it in on display until it is fully paid. So what's your billing policy in order to reduce the amount of funds that are tied up in accounts receivable? Then lastly, your collection policy. How do you collect your accounts receivable? The longer it takes to collect, the more likely that account receivable will go bad. You are better off where a customer is paying small amounts over time until they fully pay. I mean, it's an indication of goodwill from the customer. Yes, we're having challenges, but we are committed to paying our account payable. So what is your collection policy? The longer it takes to collect, the more likely that account will go bad. 1. 2, it makes sense to keep in touch with your credit customers. Do you call them? Do you have a chat with them? Yes, express your understanding that things may be difficult, that we appreciate, but however, when are you making a payment? You don't pay us, we are also getting stuck. We need that working capital. So what is your collection policy? How do you escalate that collection policy, your collection interventions? So basically, sell on credit, follow up on the customer, call them, perhaps not daily, but probably weekly. Let the customer give you a commitment when they will pay. If you notice that account is inactive, the longer it remains inactive, the more likely it will go bad. If it is inactive, then escalate it. Let it get into debt collection. Get your debt collectors acting. Get your lawyer involved, So have a collection policy that escalates that collection. Let it begin with a phone call, a visit to the customer, then have a policy on how it is going to be escalated to the debt collector, to the lawyer, to court, so on and so forth. And the point is this: having a policy need not be threatening. A lot of small businesses, you ask them, what's your policy? Where are your policy documents? Lots of small businesses feel intimidated by these words, policies, but a policy need not be a large document. It could be one paragraph that defines what you will do. Credit policy, for example, we do not sell on credit. That's a policy, Yeah, pay in cash, that's a policy. It's one paragraph. So develop your policies, have them in your finance manual, where you have all your finance policies and procedures documented. So manage your accounts receivable proactively. Don't let them stay for too long. Sometimes people are busy. Everyone is running their business. Customers have jobs, they forget to pay you. That is why you have to keep in touch, So have a policy, be proactive in how you manage accounts receivable, follow up with your debtors, call them, talk to them, and have policies to define what you do. And remember, not everyone gets credit. Not everyone gets credit, and this time is going to be very revealing as to who gets credit from you going forward. So allow me to move on to yet another important area, which is your accounts payable. How do you manage your accounts payable? These refer to those obligations that you have to pay within the next 12 months. That is what makes it current. It's payable within the next 12 months. And generally, accounts payable are the largest category here, but you also have customers paying you in advance, salaries that have not yet been paid, which will be payable at the end of the financial period, taxes that are going to be payable monthly. There are other items that are payable within the next 12 months. So how do you manage your accounts payable? This is the idea. All people extending credit to you, whether suppliers, employees you pay at the end of the month, and the tax collection agencies who will have their own specific deadlines, the key word here is pay them on the due date. It's the key word here. Pay on the due date. Do not stretch payment beyond the due date as far as possible. And if you do, get in touch with the creditor. Talk to the creditor. Let them understand, yes, there's this obligation payable by this date. There is this issue. We will not be able to pay on this date, but we will pay by this other date. Point is, 1, pay on due date. If it's not possible, get in touch with the creditor. Whether it's your landlord, your bank, your supplier, get in touch with them, talk to them, explain yourself to them, give them a date, give them a commitment. The worst thing you can do is just to go silent. Most of your creditors will consider that a default. Not picking up your call, you will end up in default status. Talk to them. Be proactive. Talk to them even before they call you. That works. Give a commitment on how you will pay. Give them a payment plan, what you intend to do. Do not go silent. Silence is taken to be constructive default. But if you can pay on the contractual date, on the due date. Then just before I move on, let me mention something here. It's a small world. Word goes round. Those people who pay, you'll just get into a casual conversation, with your social circle, with your business circle, and you will get to know who pays and who doesn't. So word goes around easily. So as a business person, as an organization, let everyone out there know that you are bankable, that you are credit worthy, we can sell to you on credit. I'm sure if I asked in the chat who pays and who doesn't pay, you will find all names there of who pays and who doesn't pay. Word goes around. So where are you? Are you amongst those who pay, or are you amongst those who do not pay? So as an organization, as a business person, you have to make a decision where you want people to categorize you. It's a decision you make. And even if you're having difficulties paying now, be proactive, talk to the creditor. That works. Allow me to talk about the last item, and this is your cash budget. Okay, now, so how do you manage your cash? From the point of view of very small businesses, where cash sometimes can be really, really scarce, how they manage cash depends on what they collect. So they will pay when they have cash. This is how lots of small businesses are run. You pay when you collect cash. So the issue is, are you collecting cash? Are you selling? That's the big one. So as part of cash management, working capital management, selling, being competitive in whatever industry you are in is the source of your cash. Are you selling? Are you competitive? That is your source of cash. Remember, the least costly source of cash is your customer. They will pay you in cash. You will give them a credit period, they will pay you. Your customer is your most convenient source of cash. So are you competitive? Are you selling? Then especially for small businesses, things are good. We will be paying when we're selling. When we're not selling, we're not paying. Now, that's the situation of smaller businesses. But then understand again, at some point in time, you will get out of that. You will have customers. You will be selling. You will have an order book. You're larger. So what happens when you get to that point where you are handling a lot more cash and you have a lot more obligations that are staggered over time? That is where the next tool we'll talk about, a cash budget, comes in handy, where you will indicate where you expect to collect cash and where you are expected to make payments to your customers. So I will be projecting next a cash budget. This is a simple cash budget. So you can have a schedule, probably on Excel, works really well on Excel. Or any other accounting software that you may be using currently in your organization. Indicate your opening cash balance. Indicate where you expect to collect cash. This predominantly from sales or collections from people who buy you on credit. Then indicate the payments you have to make. These are the outflows. And then you can work out what you expect to be the closing cash balance. So as you grow, it is absolutely where you have to pay a lot more obligations, where you have to collect a lot more funds from credit customers, a cash balance, a cash budget will help you manage the asset cash. A lot of businesses, especially those with financial challenges, do have a cash flow meeting, some weekly, some even daily, where they present their cash budget, where collection of accounts receivable are managed from, where selling activity is managed, and where payments are scheduled. A cash budget will enable you to achieve this. Cash budget works even for organizations that are very large. You really do not need to invest too much in this. Simple Excel sheet or your accounting software will enable you to do some cash budget, projecting your payments. So in a nutshell, inventories. Have just the right amount of inventory. You do not want to have stockouts. You do not want to sit on too much inventory, which ties up funds. Accounts receivable, sit on your money. Customers sit on your money. They can do so for very long. Decide who gets credit. Have a collection policy. Have a billing policy. Have a credit policy. Define who gets credit, how much, when, and how they get it. Don't give it to everyone. Be proactive in collecting. Cash. Do a cash budget, especially as you grow in operations. Do a cash budget. Then accounts receivable, as far as possible, stretch them out. Pay on the due date. Pay on the date indicated on the invoice. If it's a loan, pay on the due date. If you can't, proactively engage the creditor. Give a commitment. So just to take a quick reaction on the comment section, on the chat section. Are we getting some ideas on how to manage our working capital issues? And what is your commitment? What work plan do you have? You know, as you go back to your day-to-day activities. So yes, what commitments are you going to do? What are you going to adopt? And then understand that what we are sharing may take some time, but will not take the whole day. There are interventions that you can do almost on a daily basis to manage. So this is what, yes, thank you. Just consider a cash budget or a cash flow forecast, whatever you may call it, to help you manage your working capital. Look at how you can manage inventories and accounts receivable. Accounts payable, be proactive. Pay on due date, otherwise be proactive, engage your creditors. So at that point, I would like to move on to, I think I'd like to move on to introduce. I think we can have a break at, say, 11 o'clock, kindly. We can have a short break at 11 o'clock so that we can now introduce another important area, which is financial management. How do you make the financing decision? So we will introduce the financing decision quite a bit of ideas to share here. Let us introduce it. We can have our break at 11 o'clock. Then we will complete our discussion with regard to the financing decision. Now, the financing decision will be discussing these items. Do you know your cost of capital? What is your cost of capital? Can you reduce your cost of capital? One of the reasons we have working capital financing issues is because the cost of capital we are facing is on the higher side. How can we reduce cost of capital? Then, how can we use the information collateral to access capital? And then, how can we use risk-based pricing to access affordable credit? So the things that we will be looking at in this section. The financing decision relates to the area shaded in gray. Financing decision answers the question, where do you get finance? Finance comes from two broad categories. There's your money, which we refer to as equity. Then there's other people's money, which is credit. So how do you combine your money and other people's money to finance the assets that you are investing in? So how do you finance your business? Where are you getting finance for your business? And just a quick one. On the chart, kindly, how are you financing your business? Just to have a quick feel, how are you financing your business? Are you using equity? Are you using debt? Just a quick reaction on the equity. So let us have a look. In your business, another equity. Debt, equity. Both debt and equity. So thank you for your reactions. Thank you. Thank you. Now, so this is where now we come in. What financing are you using? And as I have said, part of the reasons that we are having working capital finance issues is how are we financing our operations? What financing decisions did you make? We may be carrying baggage of decisions that were not really optimal with regard to financing. So two sources of financing, your money, other people's money, who we refer to as creditors. Then, all sources of finance are costly. Finance is scarce. It's not there. It's limited. It's a fact. It is costly. Then this is important. Your money you invest in your organization, in your company, is more expensive than money you borrow. So if you're exclusively using equity, you will find that you are often short of cash. You are short of working capital. Equity is scarce. Equity is expensive. That's why it's scarce. It's not there. It's limited, extremely limited. So equity is more expensive compared to debt. Then long-term debt is more costly than short-term debt. So it is the most expensive source of finance is your money, or money that has been invested in your company by other equity investors. It's the most expensive. It's more expensive than the cost of debt. And generally, long-term debt carries a higher interest rate than short-term debt. So what you have to do is to mix the various sources of finance in order to reduce, minimize the cost of capital for your farm. I will project a balance sheet to explain the financing decision. Remember, we are talking about the financing side of the balance sheet. Equity, money provided by the owners, is the most expensive. We may not realize this where we use our own equity, but when we have investors bringing in money to your company, that is when you will realize the demands they will be making on your business, the return they expect on your on the investment they make in your equity. It's expensive. It's the most expensive source of capital. However, it carries no financial risk. Why does equity not carry financial risk? Equity carries no financial risk simply because dividends are paid at the discretion of directors. In a good year, things are good, profits were made, directors will authorize the payment of a dividend, will propose the payment of a dividend. If the year is tough, didn't make much profit, directors will not recommend the payment of a dividend. And that is what changes the financial risk of use of equity, because a return on equity provided, which is dividends, is at the discretion of the directors. Then the second thing about equity is that equity is a perpetual source of finance. Ideally, it is never returned. So you have that flexibility. It does not have a maturity date. It does not have to be paid back. So it does not carry a maturity date. It does not carry a repayment schedule that you have to pay this amount by this date, this amount by this date. Once equity is provided, is a perpetual source of finance, for which there is no fixed obligation in terms of payment of dividend. Dividends are at the discretion of directors. That makes it safe. However, the sacrifice investors make in order to provide the equity requires a very high rate of return. So I invest in my business 100,000 shillings. I expect this 100,000 will grow to 10 million by the end of 3 years. And other investors also expect the same amount of return. It's the most expensive source of finance. Non-current liabilities. These will include, the term loans you get from financial institutions, leases, lots of leasing opportunities today. You can lease your assets. To a certain extent, you also have higher purchase opportunities, though not used as much by businesses, but they are still there. So these are credit opportunities that extend beyond 12 months. The interest rate is relatively higher compared to short-term credit. But the interest is lower than the return on equity. So that's why you should use non-current liabilities in certain situations, which we'll be talking about shortly. But there is a big problem here whenever you use other people's money, creditors' money. You are exposed to some amount of financial risk. What if you are unable to pay? What if you default? What will happen? What if the terms of the contract you entered with the creditor are not feasible? What if you breach those terms? What happens? So you are exposed to some amount of financial risk whenever you use long-term debt. There is quite a bit of financial risk. So the idea here is, how are you going to manage this financial risk in order for your business to be, in order to minimize the overall cost of credit? So just a confirmation, am I audible, Mantui?
Yes, William, thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Okay, so yes, so how are we using long-term debt? Then next is current liabilities. How current liabilities are the least cost of finance. Absolutely the least cost of finance. They are the cheapest sources of capital. Looking at the list, accounts receivable and no interest. All you have to do is to pay by the invoice date. Customer advances. When you pay school fees for your children in advance at the beginning of the term, you do not earn interest on that school fees you have paid in advance. Customer advances do not earn interest. So as a business person, if your customer can pay you in advance, carries a zero cost of capital. If suppliers can deliver to you on credit, it carries a zero cost of capital. Of course, bank loans and other advances do have some amount of interest, but it is relatively low compared to the non-current liabilities and the equity. So the idea is to combine these three sources of capital in order to reduce your overall need for cash, in order to reduce your overall cost of capital. Combine the three. I did mention previously that where we are using equity, we tend to have a working capital finance issue. which can be alleviated by using the 3 sources of finance. We'll share a few ideas here. Now, how do you reduce your cost of capital? As far as possible, use the sources of capital that have the least cost of finance, which are accounts payable suppliers sold to you on credit. They do not charge you interest. Accrued expenses, you have your bills, electricity bills, water bills, utility bills, pay them on the due date. Customer advances also carry no interest. So the point here, to whatever extent possible, use accounts payable, accrued expenses, and customer advances as sources of finance. Only make sure to pay on the due date for accounts payable and accrued expenses, whereas you deliver the services you have contracted to supply to your customer. These are the least costly source of finance, which carry a 0 cost of capital. Use this to the extent that is possible in your business operations. In manufacturing, a lot of manufacturing firms require the customer to pay a percentage in advance. If you have a good reputation, you have become an institution, then accounts payable are a source of finance that is available and that is directly proportional to the number of transactions you are engaging in as a business organization. Use accounts payable, accrued expenses, customer advances as a source of finance. It costs you 0%. Number 2, as far as possible, reduce the amount of current assets. Current assets are your inventories, accounts receivable, and cash. Reduce them as far as possible. Target to have equality of current assets and current liabilities, which means your suppliers, your customers will supply you with all the funds you need to acquire the current assets you need to run your operations. So target to have 0 net working capital. If you have a 0 net working capital, there is no need for external financing. So, as we said in the case of Pizza Inn, the pizza manufacturer, pizza maker, reduce your current assets, be able to deliver to your customer. However, reduce inventories, accounts receivable, and cash. And at the same time, use current assets as a source of finance. Target to have 0 net working capital, which means you will have 0 external financing. It is doable, especially as the scope of your business, as the scale of your business increases. So you have more access to customer advances and you have more access to suppliers who are willing to sell to you on credit. So as your business grows, this becomes a priority. Target to have 0 net working capital. You will not need external financing if that is the case. So as far as possible, use this accounts payable, accrued expenses, customer advances as sources of finance to reduce current assets to a level where they are equal to your current liabilities, which are these. Therefore, you will have zero need for external financing. You will not have a problem with working capital if this is true in your business. Then, in terms of the long-term assets, how do you finance your long-term assets? As far as possible, finance your equipment, motor vehicle, office equipment, computers, machinery, motor vehicles, finance them using leases. You can lease these assets. Leasing long-term assets is the least costly source of financing for long-term assets. And I'll explain why shortly. Alternatively, you can finance these assets with an asset finance loan. Lots of banks and SACCOs are giving asset finance loans today. Use them to finance assets. I will explain this in the next slide. Buildings, say you're putting up a factory and you want to own the building, use a mortgage. Where leasing is not an option, use a mortgage to finance the acquisition of buildings. Ideally, a loan, term loan, where you're walking into the bank and you say, I want this money unsecured, should be used as a very last resort. Why? Why? You are a business person. Look at your business. You're running a business. Separate your business from you as an individual. Look at your business strictly. Why do you need funds as a business? You need these funds to buy an asset, which you need in your operations. You need these funds to get a land or a building from where you will run your operations. So there is an asset that will underlie the funds that are being borrowed. So that's why I'm saying term loans should be as a very last resort. The asset that you're buying ought to correspond to the funds that you are raising. I'll project the next slide. Now, suppose you need a motor vehicle. Your policy in your organization is to use motor vehicles for 4 years, then you dispose them. How do you finance this? Now, this is a typical business finance problem. I need this asset. I'll use this asset for 4 years. How will I finance this asset? Finance this asset with a credit facility that has a term that is equals to the economic life of the asset. So you will finance this asset, this motor vehicle, which you will use for 4 years, finance it with a loan that has a term of 4 years. So that at the point in time when you dispose of the asset, you will have paid up the loan. Yes, so finance match the term of financing with the life of the asset. By the time you dispose of the asset is no longer efficient, the asset is no longer economical to use, you should have paid off the loan you took, the credit facility you took to finance the acquisition of the asset. So the key take home here is this: match the life of the asset with the duration of finance. Match the life of the asset with the duration of finance. That way you are safe. You need working capital loan. Working capital is things that you will sell in the next 1 month. It is safe to take a loan payable at the end of 1 month, an overdraft, for example. It makes no sense to take an overdraft to finance the acquisition of a motor vehicle. You will be auctioned. So that's a mistake right there. That's why I have said term loan, those overdrafts should be taken as a last resort. Sit down, find out, why do I need this money? Why? And then again, personal finance is very different from business finance, because when it comes to business, I need this asset to run my business. I will use it for 4 years, 5 years. I take a 4-year, 5-year loan. At the point in time I am through with using this asset, I should have also finished paying for the loan. That is safe. That is good financial management. Match the life of the asset with the duration of finance. Then, lastly, equity. Equity, your money. Equity, your money. So let's finish with this, then we can go for break. Or we can have a look at this after the break. You can see it's 11 o'clock. Mantui?
Yes, I think that would be great. We can start from here after the break.
Yes. So let's start from here after the break. Thank you. Let's have a break for 10 minutes. That's okay?
Yes, that's perfect.
Yeah. Thank you very much and enjoy your break. To proceed, I would like us to proceed from where we had stopped. And this is with regard to when do you use equity? And I can also use this to answer a question that has been raised. Why is equity the most expensive source of finance? Why is equity more expensive than debt? Equity is the most expensive source of finance. It carries the highest sacrifice. This money I am investing in my company, I could have used it on other things. For example, I could have bought a car. I could have used this money to pay school fees for my children. I could have used this money to buy some land. So I buy land in Kenya. You know how property values appreciate. I am expecting that any money I invest in my business will give me a return that is superior to an investment in, say, for example, land. I'm expecting it to give me a return that is superior than, say, for example, putting that money in a treasury bill, for example. So, and where does the money come from? This money that you invest or anyone else invests in your business requires greater sacrifice. Remember, this money is not going to be returned. There's no repayment schedule of equity. One. Number two, remember, it is whoever is providing these funds is the risk taker. This is the person who will be paid last. So after you've met all your other obligations, any surplus is what is going to be shared amongst the providers of equity. So equity is the most important, is the most expensive source of funds. It is not apparent to most of us, especially people who have invested their money, because you've invested your money in your business, you pay yourself a dividend. The expense of equity is not apparent, but this you will realize the day you get an equity investor in your business. Now, you sell shares, you have other shareholders. There are these people who are called private equity investors. They will approach you, they will want to invest in your company, and the rates of return they require from investment in your company will be as much as 20% per annum, 35% per annum. That is when you now begin to realize just how expensive equity is. Equity is the most expensive source of finance. It is the most scarce source of finance. And if you have external equity, they are taking part of the risk of the firm. They expect an even higher rate of return. So equity entails the highest sacrifice. That's why the providers of equity expect, especially external providers of equity, expect a very high return on the equity that they provide. So as far as possible, you cannot do without equity, especially when you're a small business. Most startups, we invest our own money. We invest our own money, we invest our own savings up until it gets to a point in time where we can now access finance from other people. So for a startup, it is good financial management to be financed exclusively by equity. But once you begin getting positive net cash flows, that in the cash you receive is more than the cash you're paying out, then you can begin borrowing, you can begin raising money from creditors. So equity is a source of capital, a good source of capital for startups. Startups are extremely risky. You do not want to have business risk, which is relatively high, plus finance risk, which is also high. If you have a startup which has very high business risk and you finance it with debt, which has very high financial risk, one, your business is likely to collapse. Number two, you're likely to get auctioned because you pledged your own personal assets as security for that loan you took to finance your very risky farm. So really, equity is used to finance startups. But once you get to a point where you have net positive, you have net cash flows, you have positive net cash flows, meaning your cash received is more than your cash payments, at that point you can begin using debt finance. That is good financial management. As far as possible, equity will be used to finance startups. Once you have net cash flows, positive net cash flows, begin using both short-term and long-term debt. So by adding, as you get into that, as your farm gets into that level where you have net cash flows, positive net cash flows, you need to begin introducing some amount of debt finance to your farm. That is how you're going to reduce the cost of, remember the cost of debt is less than the cost of equity. So in a nutshell, with regard to financing equity, number one, use those sources of finance that cost you nothing. Sources of finance that cost you nothing are the accounts payable, customer advances. Number two, match the duration of finance to the life of the asset. If it is working capital, inventories that you will sell in 1 month, you can use a 1-month loan. An overdraft will work. But if it is a motor vehicle you'll use for 4 years, use a 4-year lease or a 4-year asset finance loan. Match the life of the asset with the duration of finance. Then lastly, equity is expensive. So as far as possible, make an attempt to reduce the cost associated with using of equity by introducing some amount of debt or financing as your business gets into net cash flow, positive net cash flow territory. It's how you reduce your cost of equity. So if you're a young company, you're a young firm, use equity exclusively. As you have positive net cash flows, introduce some amount of debt. So at that point, I would like just to talk about something that is important, especially to us business people, and this is the credit score. Credit scores is an important item for us as business people. And this is because I don't know whether you people have checked your credit scores, or when you go to banks and you want credit, or even SACCOs these days, they want a credit score. You pay for them to check your credit score. And this is true for both individuals as well as businesses. Now, why you need to know your credit score is because, number one, your credit score determines whether or not you qualify for a loan. A high credit score for you as an individual and for a business, a high credit score allows you to qualify for loans much more easily. Number two, the interest you will be charged, whether it is a high interest rate or a low interest rate, will depend on your credit score. If you have a default status, you will get the loan at a higher interest rate. Or sometimes some institutions will not even, you will not even access the loan. If you have not, you will not even qualify for a loan if you have a default. There are some financial institutions that give people who are already in default, but then that loan comes to you at a higher interest rate. So your credit score determines whether you qualify for a loan, it determines your interest rate, and thirdly, it also influences your credit limit. The more it takes for you to pay your loan, the lower your credit limit goes down. And I'm sure people who have dealt with M-Shwari may have experienced this. If you are a good payer, they will even increase your credit limit. If you delay paying, your credit keeps on reducing over time. So that's why you should care about your credit. And we have this, look, there's a statistic I always point out when we discuss these issues. This was around the time of COVID. Yeah, you can see the presentation there. By January 2001, we had 14 million plus Kenyans, 14 million plus Kenyans adversely listed on the credit reference bureaus. Hey, people, Yeah, this is a big deal. So, I mean, that's why you should care about your credit limit. 14 million is more or less the number of people who voted in the last general election. So basically the entire adult population of the country are on CRB adversely, they are defaulters. It's a big deal. Point is, we have a large number of Kenyans who are blacklisted. They are defaulters. They have some credit they haven't paid. So as a business person, knowing your default status is important. It will influence your access to credit. And that data remains there for 7 years. So it's a long term. It's a long term. It's a baggage you will carry for you even after you've paid those credit. That data does not go away. The data remains. So it's a big deal to know your credit status and proactively manage your credit rating as an individual and as a business operation. So, I mean, it's just to share a few things. It is necessary to enter your company into the Credit Reference Bureau. Check your company's credit reference score. At least by making an attempt to check your credit reference score, the credit reference agency will enter your company into their database and you will get a report. Then you can improve your credit rating by borrowing and fully servicing your loan. There's no other secret. Not borrowing, it's a blank. You don't have a credit score. You've never borrowed. Your company has never borrowed. But if you have borrowed at some point in time and you have paid and you have a track record of paying, then you will find that your credit score will improve over time. So for individuals who are trading in their own name, as a business name, or for companies, get to know what your credit score is. It's important. I have projected the 3 credit reference bureaus in Kenya. I mean, you can use any. I mean, they charge slightly different rates, whichever works for you, whichever is easier to access your report, just go for it, get to know what their credit score is. Just check them out. Then the next point that is important, having emphasized the importance of your credit score, we can now talk about risk-based pricing of credit. One of the determinants of the interest rate that is charged on you is going to be your ability, your past track record, your past credit record. So whenever you make an application to your bank, your SACCO, or whichever other financial institution, the interest rate that you are likely to be charged will be dependent on 1, your credit score, your credit history, and other factors. For example, what is your current income, your cash flows, the loan you are applying for, what is the loan term, what is the duration of the loan. So your credit score, your credit history are important components of the interest rate that you are going to be charged. So by looking at your credit score and your credit history, and the bank is a professional at this, the SACCO is a professional at this, they are estimating your probability of default. And they will price that probability of default, and that pricing will be extended to you in the form of the interest rate that will be charged on you. So it makes lots of sense to know what your credit score is and have a strategy to ensure that you maintain a bankable. So this word bankable we use, cliche term we use, make sure that you are bankable and make sure that your credit score can improve over time. That's how you will access credit at a lower cost. And that is how you will be able to access a higher credit limit by improving your credit score over time. So let me mention at this point in time, credit scores will range from 850 to 300, more or less, will lie between that range. You are an A customer where you have a credit rating of 750 and more. You are an E customer where your credit rating is 599 or less. You have a high probability of default, the lower your credit score. So your default rate will be priced, and the interest rate the bank charges you will be dependent on your credit score. The lower your credit score, the higher the interest rate you will be charged relative to a customer who has a very high credit rating. And this applies for all loan terms. Whether you're taking a 12-month loan or a 6-year loan, the interest rate you will be charged will be dependent on your credit score. The higher your credit rating, the lower the interest rate. And that is the reason why some of the companies, companies that have proactively managed their credit rating, tend to access finance at very low costs of capital. You know, some of them are even approached by the financial institutions. We want to offer you this because, yeah, that is when you can say we are bankable. You don't even go looking for them, they come looking for you. And there are financial institutions that do that. They know their exposure. If we have you as a customer, we will lend to you. It is cheaper than using your equity. You will, and the bank makes an income, the lender makes an income, and they lend to you at a very low cost of capital. So some of the corporations that have very high credit ratings get interest at very low, get loans at very low rates of interest. However, riskier customers tend to get loans at higher rates of interest. So in a nutshell, get to know what your credit score is, proactively improve your credit score. How you do this is by borrowing and paying, fully servicing your loan, and doing that over time, not defaulting over time. And this improves your access to credit. It improves your credit limit, it improves your interest rate. So use your information, your credit history as a resource, as collateral, by having a good credit rating. It's easier said than done because of the statistics that I had projected. 14 million Kenyans adversely listed on the Credit Reference Bureau, which is more or less every adult in the country, more or less every voter in the country is there, more or less. It's something that especially the business community needs to manage proactively. Know your credit score, improve your credit score over time. Proactively manage your credit rating over time. So we have been able to talk about how to reduce your cost of capital. In a nutshell, how do you reduce your cost of capital? You start with equity, being an all-equity finance company when you're new in business, when your business risk is high. As you have positive net cash flows, you can introduce debt financing, which is less costly than equity. You can introduce accounts receivable and customer advances as a source of customer financing. As you grow, you will reduce your cost of equity. Use the right loan for the right product. Match the life of the asset, with the duration of finance. I need working capital to buy inventory. I take a 1-month loan because I'll have sold inventory by the end of the month. That makes sense. Number 2, I want a van, which I will use for the next 4 years for my business. I take a 4-year loan to finance. So use a source of finance where the duration of finance is matched to the life of the asset. Use information collateral to access capital. Know your credit rating. Know where you stand. Are you a defaulter? And if you are, work towards improving your credit score by paying. And I have also mentioned that your credit score influences your interest rate. So at this point, I would just want to ask in the chat section, how do you make capital investment decisions? How do you make capital investment decisions in your company, for your business? Capital investment decisions relate to equipment, tools that you buy, equipment, motor vehicles, buildings, machines. How do you make that decision to acquire capital assets? Just in the chat, how do you do it? How do you make it? Current needs, urgency, kama ni lazima, depending on flexibility of the mode of payment, needs of the company. Do you need the asset? What will that asset do for your company in terms of competitiveness? Yes. The needs of a particular project, if you're in project management. Necessity. Thank you for those remarks. Yes, based on the type of business or project that you are implementing. So it's yet another area where cost-benefit analysis excellent, target market you're serving excellent, So this decision, thank you for the comments. Just keep them coming. Also questions, just put them in the Q&A. We're shortly going into that. Now, whenever you are making a capital acquisition decision, make it cautiously. Whatever asset you are buying in a capital acquisition decision is an asset that will be with you for some time to come. These are assets that you're likely to use for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. You will use them long term. It's a decision that has to be made conservatively. So how do you make this decision? And as I have mentioned or alluded to, a lot of mistakes are made by small businesses and large businesses alike in the area of making this decision. So you have to prove to yourself that these assets are worthwhile. So the decision you're making is going to relate to the area that is shaded in gray. You're purchasing property, plant, and equipment. Whenever you purchase property, plant, and equipment, you have to make additional investments in current assets. Say, for example, you open a new branch in Kitengela, for example. You will need inventories to sell. You will have customers who will buy on credit. You need cash. So usually whenever you make an investment in property, plant, and equipment, you will also make an additional investment in working capital. Then also, in the world that we are living in, intellectual assets are probably the best source of competitive advantage. A good name, people know your brand, people know your company delivers. It's intellectual capital. Means propels you 1,000 miles ahead of the competition, a good name. And there are instances where you can now get legal recognition of your intellectual capital. You can register the copyright. You can register all these materials companies give you. You've bought medicines, for example, and you're given instructions. That's someone's copyright. Those instructions belong to somebody, somebody's asset. Yeah. Trademarks. You cannot go using other people's trademarks, without their permission. You will get sued. Patents. You have made an innovation, a technical innovation. You have documented your technical innovation. You have registered it with the Kenya Institute of Kenya Intellectual Property Institute. You have a patent. You have a legal right to that, to exploiting that patent's commercial value. Then we engage in research and development to develop new products, new processes. And this is also an investment in intellectual property. These are perhaps the best assets you can invest in. There are companies whose only investments are in this intellectual category, and we pay them to use their products. So we're talking about that area shaded in gray. The decision to invest in this asset is what you people call as CapEx, short form, capital expenditure. And probably the best way to make this capital investment decision is by determining whether that asset has a net present value. What this means is simple. I'll project this. As you make this decision to acquire an asset, you must prove to yourself as a business person, you have to prove to the board that the value of the company is going to increase as a result of the investment in this new asset or project. So the red, the part in red represents the increase in the value of the farm attributed to the investment in property, plant, and equipment related to the investment in a new project. You have to prove beyond doubt that your company's value will increase following this investment. If you cannot prove this, you should not make that investment. So proving this is a function of recovering a number of costs from the investment you're making. So in a nutshell, to demonstrate that your company is better off following a decision you make, you have to prove that you will recover the following costs. Number one, you have to prove that you will recover the initial capital investment outlay. So you are buying a machine for use in your factory. At the end of the life of this asset, say at the end of 4 years, from whatever you produce using this machine, you should have recovered the entire capital that was invested in the asset. If it is like, say, a school bus, you run a school, you're buying a school bus. At the end of the useful life of this asset, say in 4 years, you should have recovered the cost of purchasing this school bus. Number two, you should recover in full any expenses incurred in operating this asset. Operating expenses, if it is a machine, it's running on electricity. If it's not running on electricity, it is running on petrol or diesel. Most of the machines we use require some source of energy. They require an operator. These machines will incur maintenance costs. This machine may even require a capital maintenance cost, an overhaul at some point in time. All these operating expenses should be recovered in full. 3, you must recover in full the cost of capital. This is one of those hidden costs we never think about explicitly when we are considering assets. We often ignore the cost of capital. But somebody provided the money to get the asset. Either the owner provided the money or the money was borrowed. If the money was borrowed, you will pay some interest rate. That interest rate must be recovered in full. So by the end of the operation of this equipment, this machine, this school bus, you should have recovered in full the cost of the asset, the operating cost. This is the cost of energy used, the cost of the operator or operators, maintenance costs, costs of overhauling, costs of spare parts. All these costs should be recovered in full. And then lastly, the cost of capital should be recovered in full. And after you recover the three costs, you should remain with a surplus. And that surplus is what we refer to as the net terminal value. Now, when we discount the total value of this asset at the end of its useful life, and we discount it at the cost of capital, what we are left with is that net present value. That net present value represents the increase in value of the firm as a result of operating that asset. So you have to recover, you have to prove beyond doubt that you will recover the cost, you will recover operating costs, you will recover the capital cost, and you will have a surplus, meaning that the owners, the shareholders, will be wealthier because of that project or that investment that you have made as a company. If you cannot prove this, do not make the investment. Just to put this into perspective, even in the private sector, a lot of businesses have invested in things that we can refer to as white elephants. The things that cannot pay for themselves, the things that customers will not pay for, things that customers will not pay for. They are a drain on the resources of the company. You don't need it. You should have not made that investment in the first place. Only those investments that increase the value of the company should be made. The increase in the value of the company is that net present value. So even without going, there's a slide I'm projecting, but even before we go to the next slide, you must recover those three costs, one, and then you must remain with a surplus. You must do that cost-benefit analysis. You must prove beyond doubt that the firm is better off, the value of the company will increase because of this asset. So just take note of those three costs that must be recovered in full, and take note that you have to remain with a surplus. So if it doesn't work on the table, as we say, if the math is not working out, then don't make the investment. Don't make the investment out of, wishful thinking that things are going to change. Who told you they are going to change? If it's not working on paper, if it's not working on the table, forget about that investment. Just do quick math and see whether that asset is going to work from you. So mathematically, that's the formula that is used, that you need to prove that you have a net present value, where that net present value is going to be that all the cash flows that are received compared to the capital outlay will result in a net positive present cash flow. So you have to prove yourself. So what I'll project is just a quick example. So this is a situation whereby you have a company that is investing in an asset. And the cash inflows and cash outflows are considered. The figure that you should be looking at is whether the net present value is positive or negative. In this case, you have a positive net present value of 3,604. The fact that you have a positive net present value, this investment is viable. Go invest it. Now, what has happened today? There are consultants who provide this analysis. So number one, your accountant can provide this analysis. They are trained in doing this analysis. If you do not have an accountant, then your auditor can provide this analysis. Then if those three do not work, there are consultants out here who also provide this analysis. So especially for large projects, make sure that you have you do a net present value analysis. We call it a discounted cash flow analysis. For large investments, make a discounted cash flow analysis of that investment. If it's not working on paper, it's most likely not going to work in real life. Do some quick math. Get a consultant, get someone outsider, get your auditor, get your accountant to do this analysis. Make sure when you go for external financing, say for example, the bank, they will also want to see this analysis. They will also take steps to verify the analysis from their own methodology, their own procedures, just to make sure that whatever they are lending for is viable. So whether they have asked you directly or not, they will still do a capital investment analysis before they extend the funding. And these days, there are consultants, especially for large investments. You may be required to present this analysis to the financial institution upfront. Your accountant can do it. Your auditor can do it. Lots of consultants who can help you with this. But for large decisions, make sure you have a discounted cash flow analysis or net present value analysis for the asset. So yes, we have been looking at how to make capital expenditure decisions. And for capital expenditure decisions, you have to ensure that the company is better off. It is more valuable after you invest in the assets you want to acquire. So make sure that you do an analysis and confirm beyond doubt that the company will be more valuable after you make this investment. How do you prove that it will be more valuable? The asset, from the cash flows you make from this asset, you will recover the cost of the capital, the investment outlay you make in the project. One, you will recover the operating costs. Three, you will recover the capital cost, and you will remain with a surplus. So where you can prove that, go ahead and make that investment decision. The analysis is what we call the discounted cash flow analysis or the net present value analysis. So even if you do not go into the financials, this is absolutely important. This is absolutely important. You have to recover those costs from the asset. If you can't prove that the company will be better off, do not make that decision. A lot of decisions companies make, sometimes on basis of wishful thinking, end up reducing the value of the organization. So you had this organization that was doing really, really well, makes a bad investment decision, and the company, you know, gets into problems. It's very hard to recover from bad investment decisions, especially where those investment decisions are large. So prove the company is better off with the investment you're making. You have to recover those costs and remain with a surplus. So thank you very much for your attention. I think we can just open the forum for questions. I can see we have a lot of questions in the chat question, in the question and answer forum. I don't know, Mantui, I don't know how we will go about it. Can you read the questions and then we can see how we can answer them? I think quite a lot. Thank you very much for the appreciations.
Yes, yes. Thank you, William. Indeed, that has been an amazing session.
Thank you.
And yes, there's lots of gems to learn. Yes, I can read the questions. So would you prefer that I read one by one or a couple of them and then you answer at a go?
We can read like two. I mean, not so that we can give them, you know, justice.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so the first one is from Alfred Okanga. Asks what would be the ideal inventory level to hold as a percentage of your sales? Is there any ideal standard practice to maintain? And then I'll couple that with Angad, who asks, how do you manage working capital for long lead items?
Thank you. Yes, those two questions are related. The inventory level will depend on your needs. What do you need as a business? What inventory level will you need as a business? Remember, the last thing you want is customers come to your organization and you tell them that thing is out of stock. Especially for organizations that do not have very wide variety of inventory. It's the last thing you want to tell your customers. You have 2 or 3 products. How can all the 3 products be out of stock at the same time? Are you in the business of selling out of stock? I mean, you lose business that way. Customers just move on to your competitor, where they will find 1 or 2 of those items in stock. So it's what works for your business. And now the question of the lead time also comes in. How long will I take to replenish my inventory? Sometimes, I don't know, for business people who are in manufacturing, sometimes you have a job that you have to do, and even just sourcing the materials takes a whole day. I don't know whether people have experienced that. Yeah. So yeah, you need a whole day just to source materials from here, from there, bring them to your premises. When you begin working on the order item, you do not want to move around. You want to be there, supervise the work. So what is your lead time? If you're working with imported components, materials, lead time even becomes more important, because you do not want to have a situation where you have a stock out Importing material could, lead time could be probably 2 months from the time you order to the time the item arrives at the port. Then it has to go through a clearing process. Then it is transported. So lead time sometimes, especially for imported items, could be as much as 3 months. So a lot of people who deal with imported items, they will want to keep 3 months inventory. It's not because they want to, it's not because they have the money to, but it's because it is safe. There's a time lapse in transportation. Even when you order, it doesn't get manufactured overnight. Take another 1 or 2 weeks, 2 months to travel here, probably a week or 2 to clear. Gets into your premises, 3 months down the line, that will be a lead time. So it depends. That's why it just depends on your business and how you have invested. And then collectively, how can we have our international logistics being improved? Yeah. I mean, these are things that can be done, at a macro level, but then there are things you can do at your business. They have the right policy. So yes, consider that, what works for your business, how long it takes you to get the materials, how long it takes you to get your materials at your premises ready for work. It depends on your business and your needs as a business. I think we can go to the next one.
Thank you, William. And I think this is just reiterating what has been the message all along the sessions, that you have to really reflect on the needs of your business and not just take a blanket solution. Thank you for that. So the next question is by Stanley, is how do you manage suppliers who do not supply products ordered on time? And then,
thank you.
Yes, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we can go one by one so that we move.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So now, suppliers who do not supply on time, that's why you can make the decision not to deal with them. If they are not a monopoly, you can develop another supplier. If they are not delivering quality, get another supplier. If they're not delivering on time, get another supplier, unless they are a monopoly. So just develop your suppliers. If they cannot be developed to deliver what you need as a business, replace them. There are other people who want that business and who can do good, who can deliver on your quality, and they can deliver on time. So develop your suppliers. And this is why you need to formally manage suppliers, have contracts with them. Have contracts with them, have service level agreements with them, and manage them. Manage your relationship with your supplier. If they cannot deliver in time, if they cannot deliver your quality, replace them. Thank you, Stanley.
Thank you, William. So there are 2 questions around advising, more towards advising as opposed to a question. So this is Edward, who says, we have a challenge currently as suppliers in counties. The chief officers finance need to be bribed before processing your payments. EACC have collided with them. What's your advice? So it's a heavy one, but perhaps you can share your thoughts. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, especially for this thing of supply, generally, I mean, there are challenges. Let us not pretend we don't know that there are challenges. And a lot of people are making the strategic decision to move out of the supply business because of just how long it is taking for you to get paid. People have not been paid for years. They have lost their houses because they had pledged them as security. The bank wants you to pay. SACCO wants you to pay, you will get auctioned. People have lost their cars, people have lost houses, you know. So a lot of businesses have made the strategic decision to stop supplying the public sector. It's a decision you can make. Remember your credit policy. There are organizations that specifically state that we do not supply to public sector. It's explicit in their policy, in their credit policy. We do not. Unless they come and request for the service, we will not go out of our way to look for that business. So it's a decision you'll have to make. If it's not working, get out of it. People have made that decision and are still making that decision today.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, William. We have Rebecca asking, how do you manage working capital in the service industry, say rental houses, in terms of stock?
So working capital. Every business has an element of working capital. Even in rental sector, you will have to pay for services. There are services, cleaning services, security services. You have to ensure you have electricity for the electric fans, you know. Every business, even in the service sector, we have a working capital component. So the thing here is estimate what your requirements for working capital requirements are and when do you need them. Because you will have to pay salaries. You will, for your caretakers, for the cleaners, you will have to pay the security company. You will have to pay what else? You will have to pay for garbage collection. Those are working capital components. You need to have a cash flow plan, a cash budget, where you are going to enter the payments you're going to make, when you make those payments, and when do you receive the cash. Make sure from the cash you're receiving, you're able to make payment for all those items that you are required to make, so that you can provide a quality service to your tenants. In some of these places, where garbage is not collected promptly, it was taken out, it was not collected on Tuesday, it's supposed to be collected on Tuesday, tenants will bring issues to the management. And you see, it's bad business as the management company. So you will have to make payments when they are supposed to be made. So just do a cash budget for the payments that you are supposed to make. Can go to the next one.
Thank you, William. So we have a question around from Caroline, how do you determine how much salary to pay yourself as a small business owner? Yeah.
Thank you for that question. How much salary do you pay yourself? At some point in time, in order not to, you allow me to use the word eat working capital. Especially small business people have this tendency, of course, you'll not sleep hungry and there's business money in your pocket. And that's how we end up in this working capital issues. So at some point in time, you will have to, once you get into a positive net cash flow, meaning that you are collecting more money than you are paying, you will need to pay yourself a salary that is going to enable live comfortably relative to the business that you're running. Small business people, the sooner you get to paying yourself a salary, the better. And that is, at that point, you will be able to separate business money from your own money. If you cannot do that, that's how small businesses especially, they're always in this problem. We don't have working capital. We don't have working capital. Working capital was spent for personal use. Pay yourself a salary that the company or the business can afford to pay. Sooner you do it as a small business, the better. Mantui.
Great. Thank you so much. So we have a couple of questions from one Kuya. I think we can use this to wind up the session as soon as we are pressed on time. So so he has 3 questions. The first one is, what are the implications of reducing the cost of capital for investors and shareholders? And then, if you'll allow me, I'll just read the 3. Then the second one is, how does technological innovation or advancements in financial markets affect the cost of capital? Yeah, and then the last one, still on cost of capital, is are there any regulatory or legal considerations that businesses need to be aware of when trying to reduce their cost of capital? Yes.
Okay, let me begin with the third one, whether there are regulatory or legal considerations for reducing the cost of capital. Now, as a business, you began with equity. You are now having some net cash flow. You're no longer struggling. You have some net cash flow. It is going to make lots of sense to begin incorporating debt in your capital mix. We say that there is an inverse relationship between the cost of capital and the value of the company. The lower the cost of capital, the higher the value of the company. So the more debt you use up to a certain point, the more you enhance the value of the company. So in terms of the implication of reducing the cost of capital for investors and shareholders, reducing the cost of capital increases the value of the firm, increases the value of the shares held by the shareholders, which means that they are better off. That is what they want. That is what, as a shareholder, I want. That is what, as an investor, I want. So it is in my interest as an investor, as a shareholder, that the company reduces its cost of capital, that the company not only has equity, but it also has long-term debt and short-term debt in the capital mix. That's how you reduce cost of capital, which means you increase the value of the firm. So you need to move away from all equity to a mix of equity and debt as you become positive net cash flow. It's in the interest of shareholders. It's what we are looking for. Whether there are regulatory or legal constraints, there are certain finance instruments that must be, if it is going to be sold to the public, it must be registered with the Capital Markets Authority. So if you are running a company and you want to sell a financial product, say, for example, a loan contract or a promissory note to investors out there in the public, you will have to register it with the Capital Markets Authority. I believe the figure, if it's targeted at the members of public, then it has to be registered with the Capital Markets Authority. So there are companies that have found ways through their subsidiaries of raising capital from investors, and they always seek approval of the Capital Markets Authority. That product is registered with the Capital Markets Authority. So once that's done, you can raise capital quite affordably and to a certain extent, even bypass certain intermediaries in so doing. It's available, it's been done by quite a number of companies locally. Then with regard to technological innovations and advancements in the financial markets, I know, let me just answer this from this point of view. I know there are a lot of funds that are available online. But let me point out that a lot of those funds that are available, those credit services that are available online, they tend to have pretty high interest rates. Yeah, some of them are exorbitant. Interest rates are pretty high. So yes, we can use technology, but always find out, is there a better financing option? Is there a least costly option? Because at the end of the day, you want to reduce the overall cost of finance. So given a choice of the convenience of online borrowing and its expense compared to, going to the bank or the SACCO and getting a loan there, use the one that is less costly for you. And usually the more, let me say, the more traditional lenders, these are the banks and the SACCOs, tend to have fairer terms and they tend to have lower interest rates compared to some of these online credit services. So probably you're better off dealing with your traditional bank or SACCO. Give you better interest rates, better terms. Some of these others can be punitive. Interest rates can be really high, probably even at 200% per annum. Just need to work out the math. Some of them are very, very high. So just be careful. Yes, there's convenience, but at what cost? So do your analysis. Unless there's nothing, you don't have another source, probably you can use them. And that's why as individuals, we can go use those sources, online sources of capital. As a business, evaluate your options better. Take more time. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, William. We have come to the end of our session. Maybe you can tell us on the chat what has stood out for you. For me, one thing that has jumped out among many other things is silence is taken to be constructive default. Such interesting insight. So you can let us know. We have come to the end. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for logging in, for engaging. Thank you so much, William, for the amazing session. We are grateful. We will continue with module 5 next week. We cannot wait to see how this journey unfolds. We have Raphael telling us credit score is my take home. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking forward to seeing you in the very many sessions to come. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.